Hello, hello, hello. Happy Monday to you all out there. My dog. Did you all hear my dog bark there? Sorry about that. So, hello, everyone out there on the internet. Would you do me a favor? There's a few of you there at the moment. Could someone just type a little comment in there and just let me know that you can actually hear me? Because it'd be very embarrassing if I spend all of this time chattering away and no one can actually hear a word that I'm saying. So it'd be really great if someone could just say, yes, Gigi, we hear you. Joey Atkins, I know you're there. So, great. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So you can hear me. Great. So, it's going to take folks a little while to arrive. It always does. So, those of you that are early birds, well done. You have caught the worm. Not that I want to consider myself as being a worm exactly, but never mind. That analogy really, really didn't work. It's not an analogy, is it? What is it? It's just like a saying or something. Anyway, so I am on my own today. We have no Yevgeny. So it is just me, which means I'm going to be talking a lot solid for however long you guys keep me going with questions. So I have got my bottle here. So apologies if I occasionally have to slurp. I also apologize for my grotty house coat here. It's really gross, isn't it? You can see all kind of the bits of, I don't know, it's like twigs or something in here from when it was hanging out in the garden. So I'm sorry, this is really grotty. It's a bit cold here in my house. So I put an extra cardigan on and realized it's really, really grotty. So I might have to buy a new one. Right. So let me just introduce myself and we will buy a little bit of time whilst the rest of the folks show up, hopefully. So if you didn't already realize this, I am Gigi. This is my current hairstyle. If you've been through the videos on the YouTube channel, you'll see my hairstyle changes quite frequently. So this is my current look. Um, I'm an ex-Amazonian, ex-Amazon bar raiser. Um, in my time at Amazon, I interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people, did tons and tons of bar raising. My experience was across pretty much the majority of the world. I can't say that I bar raised in every single country across the globe, but nonetheless, I did a lot of bar raising across all sorts of different job families, across all sorts of different parts of the world. Whilst I was working at Amazon and doing all of this bar raising and all of this interviewing, I started to spot people doing some weird things, but some consistent weird things, which was even weirder because weird is weird, but consistent weird is really weird, right? So I decided I would start asking people where they got the idea to do this thing from. And it turned out that many of them were using YouTube to prepare for their interviews. So I started doing some digging, diving deep as a good Amazonian would, and discovered that at least back then, there was a bunch of content on YouTube about Amazon interview preparation, and really the overwhelming majority of it wasn't great. Some of the strongest channels were either coming from people who had never worked at Amazon at all and were getting their information secondhand and sometimes misconstruing it, and other people who had definitely had Amazon careers but had been focused on a very specific part of Amazon. And so their advice was absolutely relevant for that part of Amazon, but didn't necessarily cross across all parts of Amazon. So I decided, whilst I was still at Amazon, that I would set up my own YouTube channel. So I started building that out, got amazing support from Amazon at the time. My Amazon career kind of ended. Nothing nefarious there. I moved on from Amazon, and I just wondered whether I could turn the work that I had done and my extensive knowledge about interviewing and bar raising into a little bit of a side project. So I set up my own little business, the Amazon Interview Whiz, providing coaching and digital courses to help people prepare for their Amazon interview. At that point, it was going for a little while, and then a candidate that I was working with introduced me to Yevgeny. They had seen some of Yevgeny's stuff and thought we'd get on really well. So we met up in some random pub somewhere. My husband was really terrified. He had like a GPS tracker on me and everything. But we met up, loved Yevgeny. He's such a great guy. And we realized that we would probably do better working together than working against each other. So we set up Day One Careers, which is what you are now looking at. Continue to build out our YouTube channel. We have a website with an amazing blog on it with loads and loads of advice. And weekly, we offer these sessions to try and give you as much insight as we possibly can in a bizarre one-way dialogue. I find these lives super strange because you'll just text and I'm talking, and it's very strange. But anyway, we set this up so that on a weekly basis, anyone that had questions that they were struggling to get answers from their recruiters for, we would try and help you. So this is what this is. The way this is going to work is I need you to ask questions by just typing in your question in the box on the right-hand side. There is a character limit. So if you hit the character limit before you have finished typing your question, just put a 1 at the end of it and then move on to the next box and put a 2 at the end of that if you still haven't managed to finish all of your question. And I'll be able to track through the list the whole question. In terms of some little bits of housekeeping, God, I'm getting out of breath already. This is terrible. And I went to the gym earlier on as well. Shameful. I'll have to talk slower and breathe in between. In terms of housekeeping, I'm on my own today. How bizarre. It's like the royal we, as if I'm the queen. Um, House rules. There are certain questions that I'm not going to be able to answer. So, for example, there are there's got to be over 10,000 different job families now in Amazon. And those job families may or may not ask you very specific functional questions about that particular skill set for that particular role. Neither I nor anyone else can be such a subject matter expert in 10,000 different job families to be able to tell you exactly what questions you can expect from a technical/functional standpoint at your interview. So if that is your question, I'm afraid I will not be able to answer it. On the other side, please don't just ask me, Gigi, I've got an interview tomorrow. Have you got any tips? Because all I'm going to do is just direct you to the YouTube channel where I've put as much as I can possibly think of tips wise and guidance wise to support you. So if you've just got that generic question, I will just urge you to go to the YouTube channel first. Then if you don't find the answers that you're looking for, or if something crops up that you can't find on the YouTube channel, you can always come back to another live. There is one. I'm here every single Monday at the same time. So I think with all of that said, I'm going to start picking up some questions. Please do just bang down your questions, with the exceptions of the ones that I just told you not to ask. Everything else is fair game. I will try and tell you if I can't answer your question anyway, rather than have you think I'm ignoring you, because I will try very hard not to do that. So let's move up to the top. Sorry, the other thing I will say, folks, is please do try and stay until the end of the session. I have some really amazing freebies to give you, and I would chance my arm. Is that a saying is that a global saying? Are any of you familiar with chance my arm, or is that a really English thing? So I will chance my arm and say that I believe our freebies are the best freebies that you can get from an Amazon interview preparation standpoint that are out there, but no way of measuring that. So hey, it's just my chancing my arm. So do stay until the end. Okay, let's pick this one. Hey, Andrew. Right, so this is an internal question rather than a question about Amazon interview, but you've taken the time to ask it, so I will take the chance to answer it. So, quick question. Is it possible to transfer with promotion from L5 to L6? So, Andrew, as far as I am aware, the policy is that you cannot get a promotion in a job move. That is the standard policy. I have heard on occasion people being able to do this and hiring managers choosing to dispense with that policy. But as far as I'm aware, the standard policy is that you can't move for a promotion. You need to be promoted in role and then do a parallel move. Not telling you that's 100% happens all the time, because I have heard some exceptions, but as far as I'm aware, that is the main policy. Okay, I hope that answers that question. Oh, Andrew, that's sweet. Most of the content still isn't great. Yours is the best for sure. Thank you. It's very kind. I honestly try and put as much effort into the content as I can. Obviously, I'm not a professional actor, whatever, so I'm sure there's some babbling that goes on in some of my videos, but you honestly have the very best that I can offer you based on my experience. So I'm grateful that you think it was worthwhile. Okay, let's pick up Cos here. And by the way, folks, I'm not reading these before I move them in, so it's a little bit like Russian roulette, but we'll see how it goes. Hi, Gigi. I have my phone interviewed this week for a marketing manager role. Yay, up the marketers. I'm a career marketer. In the invite, the format says the interview will be competency based, focused on Amazon LPs. Okay. Next part. Does that mean the interviewer doesn't seem to be the hiring manager? Will cover both LPs and role related technical questions, even though marketing is not a technical role. Okay, cos that's fine. No, competency, let's just go back to the language here. Competency based questions is just another way of saying behavioral questions. These two terms are completely interchangeable. So, what this person is saying is that they will be focusing on leadership principle behavioral questions. This sentence does not include any reference to functional marketing skills. Now, I know marketing isn't technical, but you can still ask functional questions. I'm a marketer. If I was hiring someone for a SEO or PPC type role, I would still be able to ask you functional questions based on your knowledge of Google Ads or whatever else it might be. But from the sentence that they've written here, it looks like your interview is purely going to be leadership principle based behavioral questions. I hope that helps. Okay, let's pick this next one. This Russian roulette is making me nervous. Not quite sure what I'm going to face when I pull it over. Okay, hi, thank you for this live. You are very welcome. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. Nothing worse than being sat here alone. I am on the second round interview process for a senior H&S manager. I'm going for health and safety on that. People just throw acronyms in and expect me to know what every single acronym would be. And it's again, it's a little bit risky, but I'm going for health and safety. Let me know if I've misunderstood. Any advice for this field? Right. Usually in other fields, there are many sources, but couldn't find anything about health and safety. Right. Okay. So do I have any specific advice for health and safety? No. No, not specifically for health and safety. My point at the beginning of the session is I cannot be an expert from in a functional point of view for over 10,000 job families. So no, yes, I understand why you might be able to not be able to find a lot of content in health and safety. It's a relatively small role. I'm sure if you go out there, you'll find tons of information on solution architects, software development engineers, because in the nicest possible way, no offense intended to software engineers or solutions architects, there are penny a dozen those types of roles. Amazon is built on those types of roles. Whereas if you're a health and safety person or a learning and development or a lawyer or whatever, these are much smaller roles and therefore not a lot of content gets out there. So that's why you can't get it. And unfortunately, no, I can't give you any specific guidance on health and safety for pretty much the reason I just described. Right, you haven't heard for interview for the last 2 weeks. Am I still in the loop? Should I be worried? Right, I'm confused. You're on the second round interview process and you're asking me, are you still on the loop? Don't understand. So the second round and the loop aren't necessarily the same thing. Maybe you're telling me that you're moving into loop and you haven't heard anything for 2 weeks. I don't know if you have a date set for your loop or not. You haven't been specific. So all I'll say is if you feel that it's been a long time that you haven't had communication and you're unclear on what the actual next steps are or what the dates are for the next step, just email your recruiter. As long as you're polite, they will not mind you emailing them. So just reach out and ask them the question that you need to ask them. They won't, no one's going to kick you out of the process without letting you know. That's a broad statement because ghosting obviously happens. But in the main, if you're no longer going to be in the process, some will let you know. Okay, moving on to the next one. Ping me, I'll throw. Oh, that in fact, it doesn't say I'll throw, it says ping me, ill throw. So either you missed some grammar there or you meant ill throw, and I have no idea what that means. Although, even if it was ping me, I'll throw. I still don't know what that means. Anyway, do hiring managers actually read your resume before the phone interview? I feel that this is a loaded question. I feel like you've been through some particular experience and now you're asking me this question in retrospect. So, in theory, they're supposed to. Of course, someone is supposed to read your resume before they go and interview you. Otherwise, they completely lack any type of context for any of the narratives that you're going to share with them in your interview. Can I promise you that every single hiring manager does their due diligence and prepares as thoroughly for their interview as they are trained to do? No, I would be lying if I said that was the case. So I would say the vast majority of hiring managers should read your resume before you go into interview. They will have had to have read your resume at some point anyway, because they approved for the recruiter to bring you to interview. So even if they haven't read it in the last 5 minutes, they must have read it at some point. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made it to the actual interview itself. So, hope that helps. Not sure how, but hope it helps. Ooh. Hey, Jiten, do I need to introduce myself to each interviewer in the loop with some consistent details? I don't really understand the question. So, do you need to introduce yourself to each interviewer on the loop? Well, I don't think you need to say to each interviewer, "Hi, I'm Jitten," because they're going to know that because they know who they're interviewing. But certainly, when the screen opens up, if it's a virtual interview or if you're in an office and someone walks in the room, you say, "Hello, how are you?" And then that interviewer is probably going to ask you some kind of opener type question. So, tell me about yourself, or why are you interested in that job? So when you answer those types of questions, yes, you definitely want to give consistent details because yourself is yourself. It would be weird to not tell the same story about yourself with multiple different people. Equally, if someone asks you, why do you want to work at Amazon? It would be super weird not to give the same reasons across multiple people. But I always find it very strange when people say, hi, I'm XX, because of course I know you're XX because I had your name in my diary. But yeah, so if you're sharing, if you're answering the same question over and over, I guess is my point. Yes, be consistent with what you say. Hope that helps. Okay, we got Andrew here. For some reason, I feel like I know the name Andrew Meeks. I mean, I'm sure you're not the only Andrew Meeks in the planet, but anyway, hey, Andrew. I've received a verbal offer for an L6 role and provided my total compensation goal. Okay. The recruiter told me this is out of band. Any tips on ensuring I get to the top of the compensation band? Okay. So, leverage. Leverage is really the only thing you can really lean into to try and maximize your compensation. So, anything that you believe gives you some kind of advantage, you should bring to the party. So, for example, if you are going to be giving up a bonus for your previous role to move to Amazon, use that. If you're going to be giving up any stock options, use that. If you have a particular skill that you know is very rare and very hard sought, use that. In terms of where you can negotiate more freely, as you'll know, or maybe you don't know, so I shouldn't assume anything. Assuming makes an ass out of you and me. The Amazon compensation package is a three-parter. Part one is your base compensation. Part two is a sign on bonus. And then part three is your RSU allocation. When it comes to willingness to negotiate, Amazon is more willing to negotiate on RSUs first, then bonus, then base salary. One thing I would say is once you are at the top of the compensation band, you just need to be wary that if you were to get a promotion, it's very unlikely that you would get a compensation increase. Because the bands do overlap to a certain degree, it's very possible that if you're at the top of the L6 band, you may be over the bottom of the L7 band. So I absolutely advocate people fighting for as much as they can get in terms of compensation. But just be aware if you do come in at the very top of the band, it's very possible that even with a promotion, you will not get an increase in compensation. I hope that helps. Okay. Hey, Leo. So you'd like to know how bad is it to go back 10 or 20 years in your answer in the interview? I have more than 30 years of professional life and I feel I would miss out a lot if I stay restricted. Okay, so the reason why Amazon uses behavioral interview questions is because they believe in the philosophy that if you have done something in the past, you are highly likely to do it in the future. If you are asked to bring your best story for, I'm just going to pick earning trust, let's say, and you have to go back 15 years to pick a strong story for earning trust, what happens is your interviewers are left a little bit concerned because what have you been doing for the past 15 years that you haven't been able to produce in a more recent time frame a strong story about earning trust? If you shared a story with me as your interviewer that happened 3 months ago, and this is a strong earn trust story, I can be relatively confident that if you were able to demonstrate that 3 months ago, you're quite likely to be able to demonstrate it tomorrow. If you tell me a story 15 years ago and you weren't able to demonstrate strength in earned trust in the subsequent 15 years, I'm going to have relatively low confidence that if I dropped you into my business tomorrow, that you would be able to demonstrate strong earned trust. So, how bad is it? I can't give you a scale, but that's the logic of it. What you are trying to convince the interviewer of is that you have this you have the behaviors innate in you every single day so that if you land in their business tomorrow, you will be able to bring the good stuff. If you go back 10, 15, 20 odd years, I'm less convinced you can bring the good stuff tomorrow. So it's really all about demonstrating if I landed in your business tomorrow, I could deliver. Now, that's not to say that you cannot ever go back a long period of time. If you have a story that is so impressive and so demonstrative of your ability to punch above your weight, and it happened 10 years ago, then there's no reason why not to use it. I used a 10-year-old story in my interview. My story was about when I was a very lowly marketing manager, effectively going toe to toe with the CEO of BT Group, which is a massive global telecoms company. Because I was so lowly and he was so senior, I felt that it was a really good demonstration of my innate ability to really punch well above my weight. And that's why I used that story, because it was an extraordinary story. I would not have used a story from 10 years in the past when I was a marketing manager working with a senior marketing manager on a project I was doing. Okay. The second reason why going that far back in time can be problematic, it doesn't always work out this way for everybody, but it's a potential second reason, is 10, 15, 20 years ago, you probably weren't operating at the level of the role that you're applying for today. Part of what they're also looking for in your answers is that you have the capability of supporting the scope and complexity of the role that you're interviewing for. If you're using lots of stories from a time when you were in a much smaller scope role with a lot less complexity, you are going to fail to produce evidence for them that you are able to operate at the level of scope and complexity of the current role. So, for all of those reasons, we advise not going back much more than 5, maybe 7 years. And if you want to pull in one story from way back yonder, you better make sure it's a good one, or an amazing one, should I say. I hope that helps, Leo. Okay, moving on. Okay. Hey, Fellbound. God, that's a cool name. Hi, Gigi. Thank you for having this sort of feedback. You are more than welcome. How would you recommend answering a behavioral question that doesn't align with your stories or you don't have strong experience in? Okay, so there's a little trick that you can use here that I coach all of my candidates to do. The first thing is, if you're asked a question and you feel you do not have a story that exactly matches it, but might come close, what I recommend you saying to the interviewer is this: I don't have an exact story for this particular question, but I think I have something that may come close. Can I describe the story to you in a few sentences? They will say yes. And then you go ahead and you describe it to them just in a few sentences. You don't want to give the whole spiel in case it's the wrong story, just a few sentences. They can then let you know if they think that story will work. If they say yes, go on and tell that story. Why this is a good little trick is if it turns out to be the wrong story and it doesn't actually give them what they're looking for, that's not on you. It's on them. You asked them whether you should tell them that story, and they said yes. So they have to take responsibility for it if you didn't actually answer the question. If they say to you, no, actually, I don't think that story is going to work, then my best recommendation is to ask them for another question. You can just simply say, in which case, I don't want to waste your time or my opportunity. I don't feel I have a strong story for this question. Could you ask me another question, please? Despite what you might hear on other channels, which I will not point to specifically, it is okay to ask for another question. You don't want to have to do it too many times because if you're asking for a new question too many times, it looks like you don't have the breadth of experience that they're actually looking for. But if you're in an early phone screen, once is absolutely fine. If you're in a loop, and it does depend on your seniority, I suppose, but if you're in a loop, you can probably get away with it twice. Once you're getting to three times, if you're in a loop of five people, it might be getting a bit much, but certainly once, no problem at all. Twice, yeah, sure, do it. Three times, think twice before you do it. I hope that helps. Just moving on. Now, folks, I'm going to go on mute for 1 second because I can feel my mouth sticking up, and there's nothing worse than listening to sticky mouth audio. So hang on a sec. There we go. Apologies for the pause. Okay. Surabi, if that's right. I apologize if I've mispronounced your name. Please apologize to your parents for me. I would like to know if I need to prepare for the hire and develop the best principle if my career does not have anything to do with hiring. So I would suggest that if you are not applying for a role that is a hiring manager role, which is a bit different to you not having had hiring management experience in your past. So I'm just kind of shifting slightly my focus. If you are not preparing for a role that is a hiring manager role, it is very unlikely that anyone will ask you hire and develop the best. Now, there are some job descriptions that, even though the individual isn't a hiring manager, that say in the responsibilities that you would be required to coach and mentor colleagues. If there's that type of a bullet point in your job description, then I would think about preparing a story, but a develop the best part of that rather than hire and develop the best. But in the main, unless you're a hiring manager or you're applying for a hiring manager role, they won't be wasting their time asking you a hire and develop the best question. There's only so much time that they have to interview you. So they have to pick leadership principles that are going to be most helpful for making a decision as to whether you can do the role or not, right? So if you're not going to be a hiring manager, then why waste time doing a hire and develop the best question? Okay, hopefully that's all very logical for you. Okay. Right, Sophie, I'm just going to politely say you might not have been here at the start. I cannot answer this question for you. There are probably about 10,000 different job families in Amazon, and I cannot be a functional expert in all of them and know exactly what types of technical questions are going to be asked for every single different job family in any interview. So I'm afraid I'm going to pass on this question, but I didn't want you to think I was ignoring you. Oh, I am excited. Hi. So this Jisoo. So folks, you'll all be going, what's Gigi doing? She's gone nuts. I was having an exchange with someone on Reddit earlier on today who had some questions about their Amazon interview, and I happened to drop that I was going live today. And here they are. So hi, I'm so glad you made it. And I'll pick up your questions as I go along. But cool. Very exciting. I love it when these platforms cross over. Super cool. All right, so next one. Okay, another question. Can you explain how interviewers take notes? Do they just take verbatim or capture essence and write their assessment later? Oh, this is one of two. Okay, so this is a repeat of one or two. Okay, hang on. Is there a two of two? Yes. Would it be easier for the interviewer to capture notes if we spell out each section of the star format? Okay, right. Good question. Good question. It's completely a matter of style. I am a verbatim typer. Um, Not because I necessarily need to read the notes back verbatim, but by writing the notes in verbatim, it sticks in my head. I have that type of a memory. I've worked with other colleagues who literally just put bullet points and a few words. I could never work that way. I need full verbatim. So actually, it's very, very subject to people's personal preference. So to your point of would it be easier to spell out the star format? Not really. I don't think from an interviewer's point of view that they need you to signpost them towards what part is the situation, what part is the task, what part is the action, what part is the result. They're so familiar with the star format, they'll work it out for themselves. So it's actually more of a question as to whether it helps you by signposting them. I think for a lot of, not for a lot, for some of the candidates that I coach, being able to do a little bit of a signpost as they tell their story just helps them keep track of where they are and what it is that they need to think about saying next. It just helps compartmentalize information to reduce the cognitive load in their brains. So, by all means, do it, but do it for yourself. There's no need to do it for the sake of the interviewer. Okay. Okay, Jisoo, I'm afraid this goes into the bucket of the answer that I gave to Sophie a little bit earlier. I cannot be a functional expert in every single job family, I'm afraid, so I cannot answer this question for you. I hope you have others because I made you come here, and then I'll feel bad if you came here and I couldn't answer any of your questions. And I have plenty enough in my life to feel bad about without adding to it. Okay, Sarabi, right. Will my interview have questions from every leadership principle or just a few handpicked ones? No, there's no way that they can cover 16 leadership principles in a single interview, and there's no way they can cover 16 leadership principles in 5 interviews. So, what happens is when a hiring manager initially sets up a rec, so opens up a job, they will let the recruiter that they're working with know which leadership principles they want testing for that particular role. So they will decide which leadership principles. The vast majority, well, it's going to depend on what level you apply for. If you're applying for an L8, L8s can get up to 8 interviews. Okay. So if I'm interviewing for an L8 and I've got 8 interviews, 2 interviews each, then yes, I can cover off all 16 leadership principles. If you're an L7, the number's probably going to be more like 5, maybe 6, 2 each. Okay, so that's 12 or 10. If it's an L4, that generally goes down to, have I done L5? L5 is also generally 4 or 5, 2 each, so that's 8 or 10. So it will be some hand-picked leadership principles decided on by your hiring manager. I highly recommend, if you didn't already know, that you ask your recruiter if they'd be willing to share what the key leadership principles for the role are. You've probably got a 50-50 chance of them sharing that information with you. But once they do, it's so helpful because obviously you can then discard a whole bunch of leadership principles and just focus on the important ones. Okay, moving on then. Where are we for time? Okay, I'll do this one and then I've got something exciting for you. So, what is the best way to create examples for each leadership principle? It's hard because I don't know the questions that will be asked. So, when I write examples, do I just prepare stories that align with each LP? Yes. It's impossible to predict which questions will be asked because the interviewer probably doesn't know which questions they're going to ask you until about 2 minutes before they walk into the interview. So, the goal needs to be to have probably 2, maybe 3 at most examples for each leadership principle. If you read the leadership principles really, really closely, or if you take one of our courses, you will understand that there are different flavors. I call them facets, but there are different facets of each leadership principle. So if you can create a story, some have 4, some have 3, some have 2. But if you can create 2 stories that cover the spread of those facets, in all likelihood, when a question is asked of you, because those questions are based on the leadership principles which have those different facets in it, if you have all of those facets covered in your examples, then 90% of the time, you should be able to have a story that connects with the question that you're being asked. So, very much preparation is all about creating stories based on a deep understanding of the leadership principles. When you get into interview, it's all about just answer the question. A lot of candidates will either ask me or aim to interpret what the leadership principle is as they're being asked the question. That's very high risk because if you misinterpret the leadership principle and you just pull a story from your Rolodex, I am that old, your Rolodex of stories that's aligned with that leadership principle, you may not actually be answering the question at all. So focus on leadership principles for your preparation and then trust that you'll be in a position to answer almost any question that comes at interview. When you come to interview, focus on the question and just answer the question. And hopefully, your past self has done their preparation correctly, and your current self will then benefit from that preparation. I hope that makes sense. Right. I'm just going to momentarily pause. It'll give me an opportunity to have a drink, but I have a request of all of you out there. As you can clearly see, I've put a huge amount of effort into this YouTube channel. There is years of work into all of the videos that are up there on the YouTube channel. I dread to think how many hours of my life have gone into scripting, recording, re-recording, re-recording again, editing, uploading, writing copy. Bleh. Dread to think how many hours of my life I've spent on that. But it is my pleasure and it is my privilege to do that for you. But in return, I do have a favor to ask, and that is whenever you watch one of our videos, whenever you come to a live stream, please just spend a millisecond of your time giving it a thumbs up, or maybe even go mad and write a little comment for me. What that does is it tells the YouTube algorithm that it's done two things well. Number one, it has surfaced that the right content to the right person. And number two, that the content itself is liked and appreciated. What that will do is it will boost our day one careers content in the algorithm so that other people who are looking for good, high quality, honest content will get this content rather than some of the other, I'm going to be me, trash that is out there on YouTube at the moment. So please do your fellow man a bit of a favor, and of course me, and give our streams a like or a little comment. To give you a chance to do that for this particular session, I'm going to play a little musical interlude, and that will give sorry, that will give you a chance to just give this a little bit of a thumbs up so that you know I can see how many people have liked it on this other screen that I have here. So if you don't like it, I will know and I will be deeply, deeply offended. And I'm sure none of you want to deeply, deeply offend a nice middle-aged English woman. So here we go. And if you would mind just like the stream. Oh, it might be a little bit loud. So if you have headphones on, like I do, just kind of pop them slightly behind your ears or slightly back so that you don't get completely brain blasted. Here we go. Like the stream. Like the stream. Like the stream. Folks, you can do way better than that. Way better than that. Okay. All right. Look, if you don't want to like it, fine. It's trash. It's cool. Okay. Let's move on. I will pick up some more questions. Oh, I didn't take my drink. How foolish. Never mind. Missed that opportunity. All right. Okay. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I would not even dare to try and pronounce your name. I'm so sorry. I would just offend you horrifically. So I'm not going to do that. But yes, health and safety. I did get that correct. One more question. Even if it's a field specific question, do we need to use the STAR method still? Because sometimes it doesn't fit. Yeah, no. So if someone is asking a question about, please tell me a time when, or give me an example of a situation when, they're asking you to go back into the past and bring forth a story from your previous experience. So in those types of questions, it's absolutely appropriate to say, well, the situation was, my task was, the actions that I took were, and the result was this. Some questions, if they are technical / functional questions, are going to be about hypothetical situations. So how would you deal with this? Or if I gave you this, How would you respond? If it's a hypothetical question, then situation, task, action, result makes no sense whatsoever. And what you just have to do is work through the hypothesis and work through the approach that you would take. I'm not aware of any particular model that is used to deal with hypothetical questions. I'm not a fan of hypothetical questions personally, because I think sometimes you can just end up in a spiral of kind of multiple potential decisions going down one route. And anyway, so what we would usually recommend at Day One Careers is if someone asks you a hypothetical question and you actually have an example of a time in your past where you have done that exact thing, then turn that hypothetical question into a behavioral question by simply saying, oh, funnily enough, that exact situation happened to happen to me. So I do, happened to me 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever. And this is what happened. And then you roll into the star model. I hope that makes sense. Okay. How can you tell when a position is L6 or L5? I thought I applied for an L5 position. It looks like the hiring manager left a comment that I fit more for an L5. Okay. So I have a loop for an L5 position. Okay, so Amazon has a standard nomenclature. I always struggle to say that word, nomenclature, around the use of job titles. It's not always very religiously stuck to, particularly when you get into AWS, and there are some really very specific, somewhat niche job families where they just abandon this nomenclature. I should probably try and stop saying that. But this is it anyway, and then whether this applies to you or not, you'll have to decide. So usually something manager, let's just use marketing, just the easiest thing. A marketing manager would be an L5. A senior marketing manager would be an L6. A senior manager marketing would be an L7, or a principal marketing would be an L7. So that would usually be the nomenclature of the job title that would indicate which way it goes. As I said, not all job titles really adhere to that. I see a lot of AWS ones that absolutely abandon that type of structure completely. If that happens, I tend to go to look at the number of years of job experience that they're looking for and try and make some kind of a guesstimate from my own experience based on that. That works for US job descriptions, but in Europe, where you're not allowed to use that type of requirement because it's ageist, um, it's impossible. So that's the best I can offer you. All right, let's move on to the next one. Hey, Liz, the crossword nerd. Oh, Liz, I'm so bad at crosswords. I really admire people who can do crosswords. I'm a dyslexic and just they blow my mind. But respect to you if you can do crosswords. Okay, so you got through the phone screen. Can I safely assume that you have proven some kind of competency, perhaps at least functional basics, yet shamelessly fishing for a confidence boost? Oh, bless you, Liz. There's nothing to be ashamed of looking for a bit of a confidence boost. So, yeah, there's no way anyone is letting you through to the next round unless they have some confidence that you could potentially do the job. The policy is that you should not let anyone through unless you have very high confidence that they will make it through loop. Now, as with all policies, there are different levels of application of that policy. I know Yevgeny from the stories that he's told was not an adherent of that policy and moved people forward when really he probably shouldn't have. And if I had known him back then, I'd have given him a little bit of a slap on the wrist for that. But in the main, if they've moved you through, it's because they think you're a strong candidate and you have every likelihood of being able to be offered the job. So well done for making it through. I think just I don't have any current stats for it, and I can only give you stats based on really my experience, but I would generally only pass through 1 out of every 10 that I did a phone screen 1 on. So only 10%, at least from my perspective, were making it through to the next round. So to have got as far as you've gotten, to be honest with you, is a really good outcome. So well done. Okay, moving on. Okay, you're a student and you only have a bit of interview experience. Okay. Most of your leadership principle stories are from student days. Okay. Yeah, is it worse to use stories from school like group projects, etc.? No, it's absolutely fine. It would be fully expected. They'll know your career history, they'll know that you're a student, and it would be fully expected that the stories that you would have to focus on would be stories from school, from uni, or wherever else it is. So, no, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Fully expected. Okay. What are the biggest differences between one of the interviews in the loop and the interview round before the loop? Will the loop ask more challenging questions? Nope, there's no difference whatsoever. Exactly the same criteria, exactly the same standards expected, with the exception of what I said earlier about some people being a little bit more lax on that. But no, there's no difference whatsoever. It's exactly the same. So you've got to prepare exactly the same way for both. What I tend to tell my candidates is you've got to prepare for your phone screen as if you were preparing for the loop, right? Because you've got to get through the phone screen to get to the loop. If you under prepare for the phone screen because you just think it's less important than preparing for a loop, then you're probably never going to make it through to the loop. So although it does mean potentially preparing extensively for a round where the odds are going to be more against you than the odds would be against you if you made it to loop. If you do not prepare extensively, you will never make it to loop anyway. So I hope that helps. Okay, Juice Man Epiphany. You people are wild. How'd you come up with these things? Gigi's about as original as I could possibly get. Okay, you received an offer last week, Friday, okay, for an L6. Congrats. The recruiter's been hard to get hold of. Okay, I'm looking to negotiate my offer with her, but I have to assume she's extremely busy. Should I reach out directly to the hiring manager? So you got so was it the Friday that we've just had? So literally no days ago, because today's Monday and the recruiter would not have been working over the weekend, or are you telling me it was last Friday, as in not the Friday before, but the one before that? If it's been a full on week since you've heard from the recruiter who extended an offer to you but has not come back to talk about the actual offer, then it may well be worth reaching out to the hiring manager just to say, I'm here, I'm really keen for the role, but I haven't heard anything in terms of the compensation yet. I have other fires in the irons in the fire. Yeah, I was going to say buns in the oven, but that's completely something else. I have other irons in the fire, and I'd be keen to close this off with you as soon as possible because Amazon is my first choice. If it was only this Friday gone, forget it. Your recruiter's not going to be working over the weekend, and it'll probably take them until at least Wednesday to get to you this week. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Okay, we have Liz again, the crossword nerd. My phone screen had one behavioral question, think big. Interesting choice for a phone screen. Okay. Can I presume they won't ask me think big again or presume they will? Thanks for everything. So, the best policy is to presume they will. The smart hiring manager, can't say everyone's smart, but I'm going to assume if they made it into Amazon that they are more likely to be smart than not smart. What the smart hiring manager does is front loads the most important leadership principles into their early rounds. Because if someone cannot raise the bar on your most important leadership principle, you are wasting their time, your time, their time, by waiting until loop to find that out. So you're better off front loading the leadership principles that you really, really care about into the early rounds, and then effectively you'll filter out a whole bunch of people that were never going to raise the bar at loop because they can't raise the bar on your preferred leadership principle, right? So we're going to assume that think big is the priority leadership principle for them. So what they will then do is retest you again on think big at loop to be doubly sure that you are actually bar raising on that particular leadership principle. If someone can impress you twice on the same leadership principle that you really care about, that's your most important leadership principle, then you can be really confident that you're going to be making a good decision on that candidate. So if I were you, I would be prepared for being asked think big again. It's a very interesting leadership principle to be asked at an early round. I'm curious what role you're applying for if you're being asked think big in phone screen one. Ah, that's fantastic. Oh, Andrew, Maybe this is why I recognize your name, Andrew, because you're one of our day one careers candidates. Ah, okay. So Andrew just received an offer while we were live. This is like, it's like Nature Watch. Oh, you all don't have Nature Watch. That's a British, that's a British thing. Stuff happening live. Anyway, well above what you're expecting. Oh, Andrew, you love the AI tool. Incredible. I will let Yevgeny know. I'm sure he will be absolutely thrilled. Oh, I'm so delighted for you. Congratulations. It's like watching a lamb being born. Okay. All right. I'll move on. Crazy English woman. I know. All right. Let's move on. Oh, Jisoo, you're asking Andrew what AI tools and coaching he utilized. Day one careers. Andrew is one of our candidates. So if you want to check out our website, day1.careers, you'll find out all of the information that you need to understand what we offer at day one. And also, if you stay until the end, Jisoo, I'm giving you some freebies, so that will give you a whole bunch of insight as well. Okay. Vinesh, what to do if the recruiter asks you to prepare for all LPs, having asked what LPs for the role? I know that sucks. That sucks big time. Does our course help you crack the leadership principles for the role? Right. So you're asking me, does our course help you identify which leadership principles are the most important ones for the role and how to cope with the fact that you haven't been told? All right. So I'll break this into a couple of pieces. Assuming you don't use our course for the moment, the only thing that you can do to really understand what the leadership principles are going to, or make your best guess at what the leadership principles are going to be, is to go back to your job description and completely deconstruct it. Read every single word on every single line, and wherever you think there's some kind of a reference towards a leadership principle, you note down earn trust. Next slide. Ooh, bias fraction. Next slide. Ooh, hire and develop best. And you just work out what you think are the leadership principles that are coming up, and then you add them up and stack rank them. Now, if you want a sense of how that could be done, there are 2 videos on the YouTube channel. I think there's a playlist which is called Job Description Deconstruction. It's me doing it live on YouTube, and you can see the methodology that I follow when I do this. So you can go look at those videos, make sure you understand the LPs, and then that can guide you to doing it yourself. The other thing you can do is I do run a service. It's a paid for service where I will do that deconstruction for you. You can find out more about that on our website if you want to go and check out our website. Your second point in terms of does our course help you identify the leadership principles? Yes, insofar as if you take our course, you will probably understand the leadership principles far, far better than you will do if you're just trying to understand them on your own. As I said a little bit earlier, there are different facets. Our course completely deconstructs what those different facets are. Once you really, really understand the leadership principles, it will be easier to identify the leadership principles that are being intimated in the job description. Hope that answers the question. Okay, moving on. Moving on. Oh, we've crept up in the likes, people. Oh, thank you. That's looking much healthier. Right. What's a good tell me about yourself answer? Should I focus just the JD? I also want to ask if why Amazon and tell about yourself are the only beginning questions to gauge out interviewees. Okay, let's break this into a couple of parts. What's a good tell me about yourself answer? Essentially, what you're trying to do with tell me about yourself is create some color around your resume. There's no point in just repeating everything that's in your resume because, as I said earlier, the vast majority of people will have read that before they even meet you. So you're just wasting time. So the whole point of tell me about yourself is to fill in some color around your resume in such a way that you present yourself to being an not the ideal, because who knows who else you're up against, but a very obvious connection or a very obviously appropriate candidate for this particular role. So really what you want to do is go through that job description and look to see what type of person are they looking for. Are they looking for, they say they're looking for someone who's ambitious. Or they say they're looking for someone who is passionate about customers. Are they saying that they're looking for someone who is incredibly inventive? Are they saying that they're looking for someone who's really strategic? Look for those kind of keywords within the job description And then when you're telling people about yourself, interject those types of references into your career history. So take them through your career history, but stop occasionally on different projects or roles that you've been in that you can reference this thing that they're looking for. So if they've said they're looking for someone who is particularly passionate about customers and customer obsessed, you might pause on a particular role that you had and you might say, the thing I love the most about that role is it brought me into a customer facing role, and I discovered I absolutely love being in direct contact with my customers and really being able to understand what their problems are and what their challenges. I really enjoy that connection. Ah, okay. So then you've told them a little bit about yourself and walking through your career history, but you are linking your career history with the requirements that they have for the job. Okay. Then your second question, you want to ask if why Amazon, tell me about yourself, are the only beginning questions to gauge out interviewees. Okay, so hmm, in theory, the policy always used to be that tell me about yourself and why Amazon weren't really meant to be answers that interviewers used to make an assessment as to whether to pass you on to the next round or offer you the role. That seems to have changed over the course of time. I think people have got a little bit loosey goosey with some of those policies. And now those types of answers are being considered by interviewers in the early rounds. Once you're in loop, a bar raiser should be there to stop people from deciding whether to hire you based on your motivation of joining Amazon. The theory being that if you've bothered to put that much effort into the actual interview process, then it's not really up to the interviewer to decide whether your personal motivations are worthy of joining Amazon. But that's a by the by. So generally, I would say in early rounds, most interviewers are going to cover off those questions as kind of your warm-up questions. Once you get to loop, I think it becomes a little bit more dynamic because once you're in loop, really those questions are not being used for evidence. Those questions are really only being used as warm-ups. So it isn't super weird to just open up a screen or walk into a room and suddenly be asked, tell me about a time when blah, blah, blah. So interviewers ask all sorts of things. I would ask random things like, "How's your day been?" or "Have you had a busy week?" or I don't know, "Was it a long journey to get here?" Because I was not looking for any particular data. I was just looking to have a bit of a little warm-up sesh with the individual before I then threw these challenging behavioral questions at them. So I don't think you can assume that in every single interview you're always going to get those questions, but you can probably assume with high confidence that at least in the early phone screens you will. Okie dokie. Moving on, moving on. Mm, okay. Mm. I also question how there are only two LP questions for each interview and how we should only know two LP answers for each one. How long is one answer and how deep are we going? Okay. There are not two LP questions for each interview. There are two leadership principles to be tested in most interviews. Sometimes it's one, rarely it's three, but in the main, it's two. Each interviewer is assigned two leadership principles that they have to gather evidence on. They can ask multiple questions per leadership principle in order to gather that evidence. Exactly how many questions they're going to ask you is going to vary. It's going to vary depending on their personal preference, but it's also going to vary on how long your answers are to each question. Now, bearing in mind an interview is going to be about 60 minutes long on average, and it's about 5 minutes to say hello, about 5 minutes for you to ask your questions. So there's going to be 50 minutes in between that where you're going to have to be answering interview questions and maybe getting some follow-up questions. How long should your answer be and how deep should you go? Again, generally it depends on your seniority. If you're interviewing for a junior role, your roles haven't been extensively complex. They probably haven't had a lot of depth and complexity in them, and therefore your answers are going to be relatively short. If you're a director or a VP and you've run enormous organizations and massive, hugely complex projects, then it's probably going to take you a little bit longer to explain the depth and complexity of that project so that the interviewer understands that you can deal with the scope and complexity of the role that you're interviewing for now. Um, Amazon's general guidance, and this is total transparency, Amazon's general guidance says up to 4 minutes for you to share your story. We feel a little bit differently at Day One Careers because that up to 4 minutes assumes that the interviewer is going to really work hard with a whole bunch of follow-up questions. Because if we were to just subdivide 50 minutes by 4, you'd end up answering somewhere between 11 and 12 questions in a single interview. No one answers to 11 to 12 questions in a single interview. So what we say at Day One Careers is you should probably be aiming to go into as much detail as makes sense, as is relevant for the question as you can, rather than assuming that the interviewer will get that depth from follow-up questions. Because if you have a tired interviewer, a lazy interviewer, an unskilled interviewer, if they don't ask you the follow-up questions, then quite frankly, you're screwed because you won't get the detail onto the table. So generally, rule of thumb, how long should your answer be? If you're looking at maybe an L4 position, you're fine to have an answer that lasts, I don't know, 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes at most. If you're an L5, you're probably going to be looking at 4 to 5 minutes. If you're an L6, probably somewhere around 5 to 6 minutes. If you're an L7, 6, maybe up to 10, depending on how complex the story is. That would be our guidance. Now, different people will tell you different things, and you will just have to make your own decision as to who you choose to believe. But at least that's the logic that I share with you about our recommendation. Okay, folks, I'm sorry, we are now out of time, and I need to go and eat my dinner, which I hope my husband has made for me. But before I go, I want to tell you where to go and get these amazing freebies that I was telling you about earlier. So Day One Careers / free stuff. There you will get a free taster course of our digital course that we sell. It's focused on customer obsession. What it will do is it will give you a view of the different facets of customer obsession so that you can really identify the right stories from your career history. And it will also tell you what the interviewer is really looking to hear about your or in your story. It's really good content. And there's a little mock interview of me interviewing me, different outfits. You'll never know it's me. Just so that you can see how it possibly could happen in the interview. So that's what you'll get at the end of that link. Another thing you'll get at the end of that link, which is really, really good, is not the other thing isn't, but still, is what we call the Amazon Interview Preparation Tool Pack. In that tool pack, there is a big list. I think there's over 100 of what we call plausible Amazon interview questions, all bunched up by leadership principle. They're not the actual Amazon question bank interview questions. We obviously could not share that with you, but they are based on our extensive knowledge of what Amazon interviewers are looking to understand from your question. So they're really, really good for practice. You shouldn't build stories against them, but they are good to practice, as I was describing earlier, which is leadership principles and preparation, and then focus on the question in the actual interview itself. So practice. If you take either of those, what it will then do is lead you to our incredible Heartbeat platform, where we have about 6,000 people who are members of our Heartbeat community who are either currently looking for a role at Amazon or have previously been looking for roles at Amazon. You can make friends with people, you can buddy up and do mock interviews between each other. And the other amazing thing there is that there is a AI little chat bot, which we have trained on all of the content from the YouTube channel. So if you don't want to go and trawl through the YouTube channel to answer your questions, despite me having spent many hours and years putting all that together, don't feel bad. You can just ask Andy, our AI chatbot, and he will draw the information from the YouTube channel and give you the answer to your question. Okay, so with all of that said, thank you very much, folks, for coming. Andrew, again, massive congratulations. Everybody else, if you have interviews coming up in the next week, I wish you very, very best of luck. Thank you for joining us today. Join us. It's like me, myself, and I. Thank you for joining today, and hopefully maybe I will see you next week. Take care. Ciao, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.